Snow was falling heavily on the streets of Boston, covering neon signs in white and muffling the blaring car horns. Amid the rushing crowd, a young woman clutched her thin coat tightly over her pregnant belly, her eyes brimming with panic. Her name was Claire Matthews, 27 years old, 5 months pregnant, and tonight she was running from the darkest shadow of her life, the ex-husband who refused to let her go. Behind her, his voice cut through the icy wind like a knife against flesh. "Claire, you can't run forever." Claire's heart pounded wildly, every step sinking into the snow. The terror wasn't just for herself, it was for the small life stirring within her. In that moment, surrounded by darkness and fear, she believed there was no way out. But fate always chooses the most unexpected moment to open a new path. At the corner beneath the awning of a bookstore, still glowing with warm yellow light, stood a tall man in a long coat dusted with snow, his gaze fixed on the phone in his hand. To Claire, he appeared like a wall, a fortress standing solid in the blizzard. Without thinking, she rushed forward, wrapped her trembling arms around him, and pleaded in a shaking whisper, "Please, pretend like we know each other." The man stiffened, startled by her breathless desperation and the fragile grip clinging to him. But the moment her pursuer emerged, his face twisted in fury. The stranger's expression shifted. He drew Claire closer beneath his arm, holding her firmly as his steady eyes locked on the enemy ahead. His voice rang out deep and calm, yet edged with steel. "She's with me. Do you have a problem with that?" In that instant, Claire shivered from head to toe. This man didn't need explanations. With only his stance and gaze, he became the shield she had been desperate for. His breathing was steady, his steps grounded, and his very presence spread around her like an invisible armor. Later, she would learn his name was Michael Hayes. That simple name would forever be tied to this fateful night. The moment when her trembling heart found a fragile spark of hope, perhaps she was no longer completely alone. Ethan froze, his eyes blazing. He glared at Michael's hand resting protectively on Claire's shoulder, as if his gaze alone could sever the connection that had just formed. "Who are you?" He spat each word, dripping through clenched teeth. Michael didn't blink. His reply was curt. "Someone who won't let you hurt her again." Claire held her breath, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Ethan burst out laughing, a hollow, bitter laugh echoing off the deserted street. "She fooled you already. Don't think she's innocent. She only knows how to fake weakness to trap men, just like she trapped me with that baby." Claire froze in horror, lips trembling. But before she could speak, Michael stepped forward, his voice booming against the cutting wind. "She doesn't want to talk to you. Leave." Ethan's face darkened, fists clenching. For a split second, Claire feared he would lunge. But then his rage collided with the unshakable calm in Michael's eyes, a calm strong enough to halt even fury. Bystanders began to gather, curious eyes fixed on the scene. A few phones glowed in the darkness, ready to record. Ethan bit his lip, realizing if he pushed further, he'd become nothing more than a public disgrace. "Fine," he snarled with a twisted grin. "Enjoy the fantasy while it lasts. Sooner or later, she'll destroy you the way she destroyed me." He shoved past and disappeared into the storm, leaving deep footprints and the acrid stench of cigarettes in the snow. Claire stood frozen, trembling all over. Only when Michael turned and placed a warm hand gently on her back did she realize she was still breathing. "It's over," he murmured softly. "He's gone." Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks, mingling with the icy snowflakes. All she could manage was a broken whisper. "Thank you." Michael gave a slight nod, no further words, just an open hand. "Come on, I'll take you home." On the walk back, the winter wind howled between narrow streets, lashing cold against bare skin. Snow clung to their shoulders, breaths turning into thin white mist. Yet, with each step, Claire felt a strange calm she hadn't known in months. For the first time, she wasn't trudging alone through the night. Michael didn't press her with questions or chatter. He simply walked beside her, close enough for her to feel his steady presence, yet not suffocating. Now and then he cast her a discreet glance, a silent assurance that she was safe. And it was the very silence that soothed her more than any promise ever could. When they reached the narrow alley leading to her apartment, Michael paused. His voice was low but firm. "Let me walk you all the way. I need to be sure he doesn't come back." Claire bit her lip, her chest tightening with emotion. Shame and gratitude tangled within her. Her apartment was shabby. The wooden stairs creaked, hallway lights flickered, mold stained the walls. She didn't want this man who had shielded her like a fortress to witness her struggles. Yet she lacked the strength to turn down such rare kindness. As they climbed, each step groaned under their weight, carrying the damp smell of decay. Claire's heart grew heavy with embarrassment and helplessness. Maybe it was all coincidence, she told herself. Just a stranger being kind. Don't hope for more, Claire. Don't let yourself long again. But when she reached her worn-out door and turned to say goodbye, she caught Michael's gaze. There was no pity, no intrusion, only a quiet steadiness, like a promise unspoken. Her heart wavered. The trembling solitude of her months began to ease, replaced by a small light threading through the darkness. She wasn't ready to believe, not yet. But deep inside, she knew her life had just turned onto a road she could not yet name. That night, back in her cold apartment, Claire wrapped a thin blanket around herself and sat silently by the cracked window. Outside, the wind howled, carrying whispers of threats from her past. The damp walls couldn't shield her yet. Within her chest still lingered the warmth of a stranger's embrace amid the storm. She closed her eyes, replaying the moment. His steady hand on her shoulder, the unyielding gaze confronting Ethan, the calm yet resolute voice. She shivered, not from cold, but from something unfamiliar. For the first time in months, she no longer felt invisible. Placing her hand on her growing belly, Claire whispered to her child, "Maybe we just found an angel in the storm." Her voice echoed in the dim room, fragile yet breaking free. She had once believed her heart was hardened, that all hope had been buried beneath Ethan's lies. And yet, one sudden embrace in a snowy night had rekindled a fragile flame. Resting her forehead against the glass, tears slipped down silently, no longer heavy with despair. There was still sadness, still fear, but mingled with them was a new light, small but undeniable. Claire Matthews once believed that young love could withstand anything. At 21, she had met Ethan Collins during an outdoor concert at Boston Common. The music was lively, golden lights bathing his face with a charm so breathtaking she couldn't look away. Ethan had stepped forward, offering her his jacket, when he noticed her shiver in the night air. From that instant, Claire thought destiny had knocked on her door. Ethan seemed to have it all, the confident smile, sweet promises, and dazzling visions of a radiant future. "I'll take you around the world. We'll have a little house by the sea, and you'll never have to worry about a thing," he would whisper on nights when they sat on the rooftop fireworks painting the Boston sky above them. Despite her parents' warnings, Claire married him. She believed in those ardent eyes and the vow of forever spoken on the church steps. In the early days, even in their small Dorchester apartment filled with second-hand furniture, they laughed as they cooked dinner together, sang while washing dishes, and clung to each other as they fell asleep under the dim glow of a desk lamp. Claire thought love was enough, but forever lasted less than 3 years. Ethan began to change. First came the late nights, then the smell of alcohol, then cold words. He jumped from job to job, chasing grand opportunities, but never staying the course. Claire shouldered the burden in silence, working long hours at the flower shop, trying to keep their home warm with simple meals. When she discovered she was pregnant, she sobbed with joy, clutching the test in her hands like a miracle. She thought this child would heal, their cracks would bring Ethan back to their family. But instead of a smile, she received only an icy stare. "A baby? Claire, are you kidding me? We can't even pay rent. You think you can trap me with a kid?" The words poured over her blazing heart like ice water. Claire tried to soothe him, cooking his favorite meals, apologizing even when she wasn't at fault. But her efforts met only with silence, then with rage. And then, on a stormy night, Ethan confessed everything he was seeing, an older, wealthy woman who could give him opportunities Claire never could. "You're strong, Claire. You'll manage. But I deserve more," Ethan said, his eyes devoid of regret. Then he walked out of their apartment, carrying with him the last shred of her trust. When Ethan left, Claire's world shattered. Her parents, who had fought so hard to keep her from marrying him, had died in an accident not long after her wedding, leaving behind an irreplaceable void. Her friends drifted away, unable to comfort her pain. She faced only silence in their apartment, broken by the dripping faucet and the unsteady rhythm of her own heartbeat. Her days at the flower shop became battles. Rising at dawn, she hauled her growing belly onto crowded buses just to open the store on time. Surrounded by the fragrance of roses and lilies, she trimmed stems, refreshed vases, and arranged bouquets as though piecing back together her broken life. But her meager wages barely kept the roof over her head. Many nights, dinner was nothing more than stale bread and a glass of cheap prenatal milk, her only prayer being that she could endure long enough to give her child a chance at life. On cold winter evenings, Claire would sit on her tattered sofa, hand resting over her belly, whispering, "We'll be okay, sweetheart, as long as I can keep standing." But the tears streaking her cheeks betrayed the strength she tried so hard to hold. Even after he abandoned her, Ethan lingered like a shadow. He appeared unexpectedly on street corners, his eyes full of control, as though she had never escaped him. He knew how to twist words like knives, planting seeds of doubt in her ears, that she was useless, that she couldn't raise a child alone, that no one would ever care for her, except him. Every time she heard his voice, her blood turned cold with fear. Yet in the solitude of those endless nights, a quiet flame began to burn. It reminded her that she was no longer living for herself. She had a life inside her to protect. And then, on one snowy night, when Ethan once again stalked her from the shadows, Claire fled in desperation. Her footsteps carried her, by sheer chance, into the arms of a stranger, Michael Hayes. If Ethan represented hollow promises, Michael appeared as truth without words. In his calm eyes and protective embrace, Claire glimpsed something she once thought impossible: safety. That snowy night was not only a nightmare, it was also the overture to a new melody, one she wasn't yet ready to listen to fully, but within it there might be echoes of love, courage, and a hope waiting just ahead. In the days following that strange encounter, Claire Matthews thought she might finally find some peace. But life, it seemed, had no intention of granting her such ease. Ethan, the man who had once sworn eternal love and then abandoned her, returned now with schemes crueler than ever. One morning, as Claire stepped into the flower shop where she worked full-time to support herself and prepare for her unborn child, the atmosphere felt different. Eyes watched her, whispers lingered in the air, slicing into her like blades. Co-workers who once treated her with some respect now avoided her. A few even snickered behind her back. Her chest tightened. When she asked a kinder colleague what was happening, the woman hesitated, then handed Claire her phone. On the screen was Ethan's post. "Some women never understand loyalty. My ex-wife carrying my child already throws herself into the arms of some wealthy stranger on the street. Ask yourselves, is that a good mother?" Attached below was a blurry photo of Claire rushing into Michael Hayes' arms on that snowy night. The angle made it look more like a romantic tryst than a desperate act of survival. Claire's hands shook, nearly dropping the phone. Comments scrolled before her eyes, cruel words etched like stone gold digger. That poor baby. She doesn't deserve to be a mother. Her vision blurred. Her throat tightened as if a hand were crushing it. A chill spread through her body. Not from the winter air outside, but from the weight of public humiliation. That day at work became a torment. Every customer who passed by seemed to know her story, their eyes sharp with judgment. The sweet fragrance of flowers that once comforted her now carried the bitter stench of disdain. A woman in an elegant coat pulled her young daughter close, bending to whisper loud enough for Claire to hear. "Don't look, that's her, the one everyone's talking about online." Claire wanted to vanish, but time marched on her shift, dragging like an eternity. She bit her lip until it bled, bending over to change the water in tulips, arranging hydrangeas, mechanically pretending she was unaffected. By the end of her shift, the manager called her into the small office at the back. The room, usually filled with the calming scent of dried lavender, felt suffocating. The middle-aged manager, normally kind, looked at her for a long moment before speaking, his voice heavy. "Claire, I truly value you. But customers are complaining. They say they won't return if you continue working here. Perhaps it's best if you take some time off until things quiet down." Her heart dropped like stone. Time off. For her, it was a death sentence. The meager wages from this job were all that kept the leaking roof over her head, bought milk for her baby, paid for electricity and simple meals. Without it, what would they have left? Her throat ached, but she forced a smile. "I understand. Thank you for telling me honestly." She bowed her head and stepped out, the small bell over the shop door chiming softly. Outside, the winter bit at her skin. Claire pulled her coat tighter around her belly, her shoulders trembling, not just from the cold, but from the weight of humiliation and despair pressing down. Each step on the gray snow echoed a tormenting question in her heart. How can I possibly keep going? The sky over Boston darkened as winter winds howled between the high-rises. Claire Matthews stood shivering outside the flower shop, where she had just been dismissed, clutching her bag as if it were her last anchor of stability. The crowd bustled on, yet she felt as though the entire world had turned its back on her. A dark sedan pulled up at the curb across the street. The door opened. Michael stepped out, his coat dusted with snow. He didn't address the crowd, didn't raise his voice. He simply walked over, positioning himself slightly in front of her to block the wind. "Come with me. Tonight's too cold. You shouldn't be standing out here alone." Claire startled, taking a step back, her voice trembling. How did you know I was here?" Michael's gaze remained fixed on the desolate street, his tone low and steady. "Since that night, I haven't trusted Ethan. I had my people keep an eye on him, just in case. They reported he was loitering near the shop. I came right away." Claire's breath caught. In the middle of this storm, a stranger had cared enough about her safety to watch over her. Her throat tightened. Words failed her. A bitter laugh cut through the air. Ethan emerged from the corner, his face twisted with rage. His footsteps crunched heavily on the snow, each sound sharp and menacing. Well, well, I knew you'd find another shoulder to cling to. Has he figured it out yet? That you're nothing but a liar. You trapped me with that baby, and now you're playing the same weak act to hook him." Claire's legs froze. She wanted to scream her innocence, but her body refused to move. Ethan was slandering her openly, turning her into something pitiful right there in the street. Michael stepped forward, shielding her completely. His voice was cold, each word like a blade. "Enough. You have no place in her life. She does not want to see you. Leave." Ethan narrowed his eyes, spitting his challenge. "And who are you to think you can say that?" Michael answered in one crisp, unyielding word. "Michael Hayes." The name dropped into the winter air, icy, steady, undeniable. Claire etched it into her memory, as though it were carved into her heart. Ethan faltered, then barked a mocking laugh, before shoving past and vanishing into the snow. Claire stood trembling, chest heaving. Tears welled, not only from fear, but from the fact that once again, someone had shielded her from the loneliness she had come to know too well. Michael turned, his eyes still cool, but not unkind. He extended his hand, not commanding, but inviting. "Let's go. I'll take you home." Claire hesitated, then her shaking hand slipped into his. And for the first time in months, she let someone guide her through the darkness. That night, Michael accompanied Claire back to her worn apartment. He spoke little along the way, simply walked beside her, allowing silence to be her shelter. When they arrived, she faltered, then whispered, "Would you come in for a moment? I'm not sure I'm okay." Michael nodded and stepped into the small apartment. The dim yellow light of a table lamp couldn't hide the peeling walls or the constant drip of the pipes. Claire sat at an old wooden chair by the table, her hands trembling around a glass of water. "My people reported Ethan's left to the neighborhood," he said simply, voice calm and grounding. "I just wanted to be sure he didn't come back to harass you." Claire bit her lip, torn between gratitude and embarrassment. You don't have to care this much about me." Michael held her gaze unwavering. "I know, but I don't walk away when someone's been pushed to the edge." Claire lowered her head. Tears slid down her cheeks. "Ethan is destroying me. He's turned everyone against me. I lost my job. Neighbors look at me like I'm a disease. I'm afraid I can't take it anymore." Michael was silent for a beat. He didn't intrude, only stood at the threshold as though respecting her space. Then his voice came slow and warm. "Claire, he can damage your reputation, but he can't touch your true worth. If you're exhausted, remember this. You don't have to fight alone." His words were like a candle lit in a dark room. Claire's heart trembled, both touched and terrified. She shook her head, whispering, "I'm afraid, if you stand beside me, he'll drag you down too. I can't watch someone else be destroyed because of me." Michael's reply was short, his eyes fierce but calm. "Then let him try. I'm not afraid of the mud. And don't ever think of yourself as a burden." Claire's whole body shivered. No one had ever spoken to her like that. In his eyes, she glimpsed something she hadn't felt in years. Trust. The next day, social media erupted again with cruel remarks. Ethan wrote another post, mocking Michael as a fool trapped by a failed woman's pitiful act. Anonymous messages flooded Claire's phone. Curses, threats, humiliations. Every time the screen lit up, her heart twisted painfully. That entire day she barely moved from her chair. Her tea grew cold, her eyes fixed blankly on the cracked wall. In her head, Ethan's laughter mingled with venomous words drowning her will to go on. As night fell, she slumped over the table, her phone slipping from her hand and hitting the floor with a dry clatter. Then came a knock. At first she thought it was her imagination, but it persisted steady and patient, drawing her back to reality. When she opened the door, Michael stood there, his shoulders dusted with snow. He stepped inside, carrying with him a calm that felt immune to the storm outside. Without preamble, he placed a thick file on the table. "I had my people investigate," he said evenly. "And here's the truth. Ethan can fool the world for a while, but not forever. Soon, it will all come to light. But until then, Claire, remember this? You are not alone." Claire's hands trembled as she opened the file. Inside were sharp photographs of Ethan, hand in hand, with a wealthy older businesswoman at upscale restaurants. Copies of hotel receipts, expensive gifts, emails full of bargains and promises. Each page slashed through his false mask like a blade. Her tears spilled over as she stared at the evidence. In the suffocating dark of despair, the truth glowed like a torch cutting through the night. Her fingers tightened on the folder, her heart swelling with gratitude and disbelief. She looked up, her lips quivering. You really did all this for me." Michael nodded slowly. In his eyes was no pity, only steadfast conviction. "Not just for you, for justice. And because I believe you deserve a life far better than the one you've been forced to endure." That night after he left, Claire stood by her window watching his car disappear into the distance. Her heart was torn between fear of Ethan's revenge and the flickering flame of hope within her. She placed her hand on her belly and whispered, "Baby, maybe there's really someone who wants to protect us." For the first time in months, she dared to breathe deeply, dared to believe the storm might one day pass. But in the shadows beyond, Ethan still watched his twisted smile never leaving his face. And Claire did not yet know. What she had just lived through was only the prelude to a far fiercer battle awaiting her. Winter night draped Boston in its icy veil. Street lamps cast pale yellow light over the snow, creating a scene that was at once serene and ominous. In her small Dorchester apartment, Claire Matthews sat at an old wooden table, eyes red as she stared at the file Michael Hayes had left behind. Photos, receipts, emails scattered across the surface like torn open wounds. Images of Ethan Collins hand in hand with a wealthy woman, Vivian Moore, at lavish restaurants. Gifts so extravagant he could never have bought them himself. Claire clutched a receipt, her hand trembling. It felt as if her heart were exploding. Ethan had abandoned her and their unborn child just to chase money. And all that time he had mocked her, smeared her, turned her into a laughingstock for the world. Tears streamed down, but this time they carried not only sorrow, but a deep burning rage. Claire gripped the paper tightly and whispered, "He destroyed me, only to hide his own shame." Days later, Michael came to her apartment as she tended to wilted flowers salvaged from the shop after losing her job. He didn't speak at first, just stood quietly at the doorway, his eyes lingering on her rough scratched hands from trimming stems. Finally, his calm voice broke the silence. "This weekend, my company is hosting a charity gala. I want you to come with me." Claire froze, the scissors slipping from her fingers. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Me? Are you serious, Michael? I don't belong in that world. I'd be nothing but a spectacle, the target of whispers and mockery." Her voice cracked, her fear of humiliation spilling into her words. But Michael didn't waver. He stepped closer, his tone steady and sure. "That's exactly why you should come. Ethan and the others want to turn you into a ghost to force you into hiding. But you deserve to hold your head high. And I want you at my side so they can all see the truth. Claire Matthews has not been defeated." Her heart stumbled, torn between trembling fear and a surge of warmth. In his unwavering eyes, she saw not just an invitation, but a chance to reclaim the dignity she had lost. The night of the gala arrived. Michael's assistant had prepared a simple, elegant, pearl-colored gown for her. When she put it on, she froze before the mirror. Her hair was neatly swept up her face, softly touched by makeup, and in her eyes glowed a gentle light long buried beneath ashes of pain. She touched her reflection, whispering through a lump in her throat, "Maybe I can still be myself, not just a victim." The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, violins weaving their delicate notes through the air. Dresses sparkled, champagne glasses clinked. The world felt impossibly far from Claire's reality. She nearly turned back at the grand entrance, but Michael's hand rested gently on her arm, steady guiding. His grip was firm, not showy, but reassuring, saying without words, "I'm here. You won't face this alone." Her chest tightened as whispers followed her steps. "Isn't that the woman with the scandal online? What's she doing here? Who would bring someone like her?" Every word pierced her fragile pride. Claire lowered her gaze, ready to shrink away. But Michael stopped, turned to his acquaintances, and introduced her with a calm, ringing voice. "This is Claire Matthews, the bravest woman I've ever known." For a moment, the room fell silent. No mocking laughter, no sharp words. Only astonished eyes, some even nodding with respect. Claire's heart pounded. Each time he spoke her name aloud, she felt lifted as though the weight crushing her was easing. Under the glow of the chandeliers, she realized maybe the whispers would never fully disappear, but at least she was no longer battling them alone. Then, like a bitter gust, Ethan appeared. He strolled in with Vivian on his arm, her glittering gown catching the light of the chandeliers. Ethan's smile widened when he spotted Claire. "Well, look who we have here. Sweet little Claire. I never thought I'd see you in a place like this. I guess a billionaire's touch can turn trash into treasure." Snickers rippled from a few curious guests. Claire's face burned, her pulse racing. She felt frozen in place. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dripping venom. "Michael, you'd better be careful. She once trapped me with that baby, and she'll do the same to you." The air tightened. Whispers turned sharp, cutting like knives. Claire bowed her head, feeling stripped bare under 100 eyes. But Michael's hand tightened around hers, pulling her close. His voice thundered across the hall, clear and commanding. "Enough, Ethan." The room went silent. All eyes turned to Michael. His gaze locked onto Ethan, his tone cold as steel, every word striking heavy. "You stand here pretending to be a victim, while everyone knows you're nothing but a leech. Shall I bring out the receipts, the photos, the emails, proof that you've been living off Vivian Moore's wealth?" Gasps erupted the hall, buzzing like waves crashing against the shore. Guests murmured, phones rose to record. Vivian's face paled. She wrenched her arm from Ethan's grasp, her eyes burning with humiliation. "No, it can't be," a woman whispered. "I heard rumors, but he's been using Vivian's money for his lavish lifestyle," another guest muttered with disdain. Ethan staggered, sweat glistening on his forehead. He forced a weak laugh. "Don't believe him. It's all lies." But Michael pressed forward, his voice ringing like a gavel. "Everyone here knows you never earned a cent on your own. Meanwhile, Claire, the woman you've smeared, has fought every day to survive, raising her child alone in the face of scorn and silence. She is 1,000 times stronger than you. She dares to face the darkness, while you cower behind another woman's fortune. That is the difference between dignity and cowardice." The hall erupted. Applause began hesitantly, then grew into a resounding ovation echoing beneath the crystal chandeliers. Guests' eyes turned on Ethan. No respect, left only contempt. Vivian spun away her face like stone, abandoning him in the middle of the hall. His false allies slipped into the crowd, distancing themselves. Claire stood still, her chest-tight tears streaming down her cheeks. But this time, they were not tears of shame. For the first time, someone had defended her openly, before the entire world. He wasn't just her protector. He was a beacon exposing the truth she had borne alone for so long. Ethan was speechless, his face twisted with rage, yet words failed him. In the thunder of applause, he shrank into a pathetic figure, small and despised. Later, back at her apartment, Claire removed her heels, her aching feet heavy, as though she had stepped out of a suffocating dream. The elegant gown clung awkwardly to her in the shabby room, with peeling walls and dim light. She sank onto the old sofa, staring at the fogged window pane. Reflected there was her own face, eyes swollen, cheeks streaked with tears. In her mind, Ethan's words from the gala replayed like echoes from a deep abyss. "She'll trap you with that baby. The whispers, the suspicious glances, they pierced her again and again. Cradling her belly, she whispered hoarsely, "Baby." "Does everyone really think I'm just a burden?" Silence swallowed the room. Then came a firm knock at the door. Claire, startled, hesitated before opening it. Michael stood there still in his tailored suit, his breath carrying the winter chill. But his eyes this time brimmed with quiet concern. He stepped in, draping his coat over her shoulders. His voice was steady, yet tender. "Don't let his words haunt you. You are not a burden, Claire." Her tears broke free again, pouring from all the pain she had buried. "You don't understand. You have everything, money, reputation, status. I only have debts, shame, and a child. I can't drag you down with me." Michael paused, then crouched to meet her eyes. In the dim light, his gaze was clear, gentle but unshakable. "Claire, I'm not here because I have to be. I choose to be here. Because I see a woman who fought through everything when no one else stood by her. You think you're only a burden, but what I see is courage. And that's what makes me want to stay no matter what others say." Claire's breath caught her eyes shining with tears. For the first time, she felt seen. Not through scandal or lies, but through her strength and endurance. In that moment, the crushing weight in her chest seemed to ease. Outside in the dark street, Ethan lurked beneath bare trees, his eyes blazing with hatred as he watched the faint glow from her window. A crooked smile twisted his lips. He knew if he wanted to regain control, he would need a far more vicious strike, one that would shatter them both. Inside, Claire leaned against Michael's shoulder. His steady heartbeat echoed like a lullaby in the winter night, though her heart was still tangled with fear. For the first time in years, a thought glimmered. Maybe I can truly live, not just survive. The next morning, Boston lay beneath a heavy gray sky, clouds swollen with the promise of another storm. News of the gala filled every paper, every screen. Photos spread like wildfire. Michael, standing tall on stage, pointing to the evidence on the giant screen. Ethan's flushed face as Vivian pulled her hand away. The public erupted. Some began to believe Claire had been wronged all along. Yet countless cruel voices still swarmed her inbox and social feeds. She's just pretending to be weak. What a performance. Desperate Ethan fanned the flames further, posting venomous words. "Don't be fooled. She's nothing but a failure now, clinging to a billionaire to cleanse her name. Money can buy anything." Claire read it, her heart lanced with pain. Her phone buzzed non-stop with anonymous messages, curses, threats, filthy mockery. Each glowing notification felt like a blade against her skin. She hurled the phone aside, burying her face in trembling hands. It felt as though the entire world still stood against her, even as the truth began to seep through. But Michael was already preparing for Ethan's counterattack. He knew the man would fight savagely. He gathered his lawyers and investigators, people well versed in dismantling lies. Every receipt, every email, every photograph was arranged into a complete case. No longer scattered fragments, but a damning portrait. Ethan hadn't just abandoned his wife, an unborn child. He'd leached off Vivian's fortune, using her money to buy influence and maintain his illusion of power. As Michael fastened his briefcase, his jaw set. His voice was steel. It's time the truth was brought into the light. But Claire, be ready. He won't give up easily. A man with nothing left is the most dangerous kind. A week later, Ethan seized his chance. At Midtown's Grand Conference Center, Michael was invited to speak at a major corporate event. The hall was packed, hundreds of journalists, cameras, and influential figures. Michael asked Claire to come. At first she hesitated, frightened of all the eyes. But he held her hand, his gaze unwavering. "I don't need you to prove anything to the world. I only want you to know we're walking through this storm together." She wore a simple blue dress, her makeup light. Yet, as they entered the hall, hundreds of stares fell upon her. She trembled, but Michael's hand around hers anchored her. He stepped up to the podium, his voice echoing. "In business as in life, truth is the foundation. Build on lies and everything will eventually collapse." Applause rippled, but before it settled, a bitter voice sliced through from the back. "Pretty words, Michael, but what if the truth isn't on your side?" All eyes turned. Ethan stormed forward, face flushed, eyes blazing. He brushed past security, jabbing a finger at Claire. "She's no victim. She's a liar. She destroyed me, and she'll destroy you too. Gasps filled the room, cameras flashing. Claire froze, her heart hammering. But Michael raised his hand for silence. His voice rolled steady and unyielding. You claim I've been deceived? Then let everyone here see the truth. The screen behind him lit up. Image after image appeared: Ethan and Vivienne entering luxury hotels, receipts for lavish gifts, emails dripping with transactions and bargains. The hall erupted in shock. Cameras zoomed in on Ethan's paling face, beads of sweat breaking across his forehead. Michael's gaze cut through him, his words like a hammer. While Claire struggled every day to survive, you abandoned her, living in excess on another woman's money. You're no victim, Ethan. You are the betrayer. Thunderous applause exploded, crashing through the hall like waves. Ethan screamed, his voice cracking, incoherent, but security was already on him, dragging him out under the jeers of the crowd. Claire sat stunned, tears spilling. But these were not tears of shame. They were tears of release. For the first time, the world had heard the truth. That night, her apartment was hushed. She slipped off her coat, damp with the night's chill, and stood still for a long time in the dim light. In her reflection, she no longer saw a broken woman. She saw someone who had endured, who had stood tall through the storm. Claire pressed her hand to her belly, whispering, "Sweetheart, finally we've been vindicated." Her tears fell, but they were lighter now, tears of relief washing away months of humiliation. A quiet sound stirred behind her. The door opened and Michael entered, still in his suit, his tie slightly loosened after the long day. He didn't boast, didn't smile with triumph. He simply hung up his coat, giving her silence to gather herself. When Claire turned, their eyes met. In his gaze there was no pride, no self-congratulation, only calm sincerity and a flicker of tender concern. He stepped closer, his voice low and warm. "Claire, you did the hardest part. All I did was let the truth speak." Her hands tightened, her heart fluttering in a new rhythm. She didn't answer immediately, only sank into the wooden chair by the window and drew a deep, trembling breath. Michael didn't push. He pulled a chair beside her, and together they watched the snow swirl under the yellow street lamps. No words, only their breaths mingling in the silence. Exhaustion weighed on her eyes, and unconsciously she leaned against his shoulder. Michael stayed perfectly still, letting her fragile frame rest. Outside, the wind howled through the streets. But inside that worn apartment, a fragile peace flickered into life. In that moment, Claire knew. No matter what storms tomorrow brought, she would not face them alone again. Yet in the dark, a pair of bloodshot eyes still burned with fury. Ethan had not given up. And the next time he swore, he wouldn't just attack her reputation. He would strike at the very core of Claire's heart. The next morning, Boston awoke to the aftershock of the media storm. Snow began to melt, leaving glittering puddles along the sidewalks. Claire Matthews sat quietly in her small apartment, the laptop screen glowing before her, flooded with headlines. Young entrepreneur Ethan Collins exposed living off. Wealthy patron abandoning pregnant wife. Photos from the conference were everywhere. Michael standing tall, finger pointing at the evidence on the giant screen, Ethan's face drained of color as Vivienne tore her hand away. The tide of public opinion shifted. Claire's inbox overflowed with messages. "I was wrong about you. I'm sorry I believed the lies. Praying for you and your baby." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she read, her heart quivering with relief. For the first time in months, she felt her voice had not been silenced. Yet beneath the joy lay a gnawing fear she knew Ethan too well. He wouldn't vanish so easily. That evening, Michael invited her to a small bistro along the Charles River. No glittering chandeliers, no paparazzi. Only brick walls lit by warm, golden lamps, the sound of water lapping outside the windows. The simplicity eased her nerves, making her feel she wasn't being forced into a world too different from her own. When the server left them alone, Michael leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Claire, do you see the truth finally won?" She nodded faintly, but her lips pressed tight. "Yes, but I'm still afraid. Ethan won't give up. I know him. When he's lost everything, he becomes reckless." Michael covered her hand with his, the warmth of his palm soothing her trembling. His voice was firm, unwavering. "Then we'll face him. I won't let him lay a hand on you again." In his eyes was a strength she had never seen in anyone else. A part of her longed to trust him, but another part recoiled. because once she had trusted a man completely, and it had cost her everything. 2 days later, her fears proved true. At dawn, heavy knocking rattled her apartment door. She clutched her belly instinctively, her heart lurching. But it was only the mailman holding out a thick envelope. Claire opened it and her knees buckled. It was a lawsuit. Ethan was petitioning the court to recognize his paternity and claim custody of the child. Her tears fell hot and fast. He wasn't just trying to destroy her name, he wanted to rip her baby away. That evening when Michael arrived, she shoved the papers into his hands, her voice breaking. "He's going to take my baby, Michael. I can't let that happen." Michael scanned the pages quickly, his eyes hardening like steel. "He won't win. I prepared for this. But Claire, you must believe in me and in yourself." A preliminary hearing was scheduled within days. The courtroom was cold wooden benches creaking as people shifted. Claire sat in the back, her hands clenched so tight they turned white. Ethan entered in a tailored suit, a smug, false smile painted on his face, pretending to be the image of a responsible father. Michael's attorney rose first, laying out the evidence like blades. Photos of Ethan and Vivienne at exclusive restaurants, hotel receipts, lavish gifts bought with Vivienne's credit card, testimonies from staff who had witnessed it all. Each detail chipped away at his facade. Ethan lost his composure, shouting, "She's the liar. She's unstable, unfit to raise a child. I am the real father." Claire's heart shattered at his words, her body trembling. But then Michael stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rage. His tone was calm, yet thunderous, echoing through the chamber. "Your Honor, a true father does not abandon his wife and unborn child to chase his own desires. Claire Matthews may be poor, but she has fought every single day to work to protect, to carry this child alone. A true father stands beside her, not a man who turned his back." The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Eyes that had been uncertain now turned toward Ethan with disgust. Claire wept silently, but these tears were no longer of shame. She leaned toward Michael, gripping his hand, whispering through sobs, "Thank you." Michael didn't glance down, but his fingers tightened around hers, answering without words. The story spread like wildfire. The public raged at Ethan's hypocrisy. Business partners severed ties. One by one, his contracts collapsed. Vivienne Moore, humiliated beyond endurance, issued a statement. "I was deceived. I want no connection with this man." Ethan plunged into ruin, but Claire couldn't exhale just yet. She knew. An animal cornered was at its most dangerous. One winter afternoon, Michael drove her out of the city. A wooden house stood among snow-covered fields, the fireplace crackling the scent of pine in the air. To Claire, it felt like another world. She stood on the balcony watching snowflakes drift. Her voice shook as she whispered, "For the first time in months, I feel safe." Michael came up behind her, wrapping his arm gently around her shoulders. His voice was low, almost like a vow. "This is what you deserve, peace and a new beginning." She leaned into him, emotions flooding. But deep down, a warning voice still murmured, Ethan had never known how to let go. And indeed, that very night as they sat by the fire, its warm glow dancing over Claire's face, headlights suddenly pierced the window. "Ethan!" His face contorted with fury, he roared through the storm. "Claire, you can't take everything from me." Claire paled, clutching her belly. Michael shot to his feet, eyes sharp as he signaled his security team. But Claire knew. This time she couldn't simply hide behind someone else. This was the moment she had to face him herself. She touched Michael's arm, shaking her head. "No, let me speak to him. This is my fight." Michael hesitated, but when he saw the resolve in her eyes, he stepped back, giving her space. Claire walked out onto the porch, the icy wind whipping her face. Before her stood Ethan, disheveled, broken, yet still burning with obsession. "Ethan," her voice trembled, but it carried strength. "You have no claim on me anymore. You will never again destroy my life, and you will never touch my child." "She's mine," Ethan screamed, taking a step closer. "You can't erase me from her life." Claire held her belly, tears spilling, but her words rang clear into the snowy night. "A real father doesn't abandon, doesn't betray. You did all of that. You are not a father. You are only the past. And I've left that past behind." At that moment, security swarmed in, seizing Ethan as he fought and cursed. His screams faded as they dragged him away, swallowed by the winter storm. Claire collapsed to her knees, tears flowing freely. Michael rushed out, pulling her into his arms. Against his chest she whispered, voice breaking yet full of release. For the first time, I feel truly free. That night by the fire's glow, Claire leaned against Michael. Her heart still raced, but for the first time in months, she felt light. The greatest battle was over. Ethan could no longer touch her. Before her stretched a new journey, of peace, of trust, and perhaps of love born from the ashes of her tears. Winter slowly retreated from Boston, leaving behind melting patches of ice glistening on the sidewalks. The first pale rays of spring filtered through the small window of Claire Matthews's apartment, casting a gentle glow across her face. She sat in her wooden chair, her hand tenderly stroking her belly, now heavy and nearly ready to bring new life into the world. At last, the endless months of storms seemed to be fading into the past. The Ethan Collins, the name that had once made her tremble, was now nothing but a shadow. After being restrained at the country house, he lost everything. Vivian Moore severed ties completely. The media no longer praised him, but instead reported his downfall as a cautionary tale. He vanished from public view, reduced to little more than bitter curses whispered into the dark. Claire knew he still existed somewhere, but his power to haunt her was gone. One afternoon, Michael Hayes drove her to a secluded estate on the shores of Cape Cod. He had thought carefully before deciding, though Ethan was finished, a man stripped of everything might still lash out recklessly. Michael wanted Claire and her child to be safe as she entered the final weeks of pregnancy. The house was spacious but unpretentious. Large windows opened toward the sea where the breeze carried the tang of salt and the steady rhythm of waves. Stepping out onto the balcony, Claire let the sea wind sweep through her hair and drew in a deep breath. For the first time she felt her veins clear, as if the last remnants of her dark past had finally been washed away. This is peace, she whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Michael stood behind her, watching quietly. He didn't press her to define what they were. He understood. After everything, Claire needed time before trusting another man completely. But deep down, he knew he was no longer just a bystander in her life. He came closer, his arm slipping gently around her shoulders. It was no display, no demand, only a silent promise: I am here and I will stay. And you deserve it, his low voice murmured against her ear. Not only for yourself, but for your child. In that embrace, Claire heard the steady rhythm of his heart, so different from the chaos she had known. She wasn't ready to call him her lover or her husband, but in that moment, she knew he was the anchor fate had placed beside her. And it was enough. The days that followed were painted in new colors. In the mornings, she strolled along the shoreline, seagulls crying overhead. Afternoons found her curled in the house's small library, sunlight spilling across the pages of her books. And at night, she and Michael sat before the fire, talking softly about the future. Are you afraid? Michael asked, once his hand resting gently on her belly, feeling the child stir within. Claire smiled faintly, her eyes tender. Yes, but not like before. The fear I once knew came with despair. Now it comes with hope, because I know I'm not alone anymore. Michael clasped her hand, whispering, I promise I'll always be here. And then one spring morning, when the plum blossoms whitened the garden outside, the pain came. Michael rushed her to the hospital, never leaving her side. In the stark white hallway, he held her hand as she cried out, murmuring over and over, You'll be okay, I'm right here. Through hours of labor, Claire clung to his voice, to his presence. And then, piercing the tense air, came the fragile cry of a newborn, sharp and beautiful, like the first song of spring. A tiny girl, red and trembling, was laid upon Claire's chest. Claire sobbed, laughter breaking through her tears as she whispered, My daughter. Michael sat beside her, his own eyes glistening. He pressed a tender kiss to her forehead and murmured, Both of you, you're my miracle. The days after were filled with gentle recovery. The hospital room overflowed with flowers from strangers who had once condemned her. Cards scrawled with apologies. I believed the lies. I'm sorry. Touched her deeply. One evening, as she rocked her daughter to sleep, Claire looked at Michael and asked softly, Why did you do all this for me? I had nothing to give back. Michael sat down beside her, gazing at the two of them with quiet reverence. His voice was warm, like spring sunlight. "You've given me something money could never buy. You've given me a reason to believe in real love. And now, you've given me a family." Her throat tightened, tears spilling freely. In that moment, she realized every loss, every wound had led her here. To this room, this child, this man. She was no longer a victim, but a mother, a woman loved. When spring touched the threshold of their Cape Cod home, they brought the baby back. Claire placed the crib by the wide window where the sunlight poured in. The sea's rhythm beat steadily outside, a reminder that though life could rage like a storm, it always calmed again. Michael stepped forward, wrapping his arms around them both. Claire leaned against his chest, eyes closed, listening to the music of his heartbeat. For the first time in years, she felt utterly safe. She whispered, "At last the storm is gone, and I've found my home." Michael kissed her hair, answering softly, "Not just a home, Claire, a new beginning for us." Beyond the window, the sun spread golden threads across the sea, weaving a future bright and boundless. And in the shelter of love, Claire knew no matter what trials lay ahead, she would never walk alone again. Boston, a gentle autumn morning. On a street once darkened by whispers and lies, now rang the laughter of a little girl of 3, her golden hair gleaming in the sun. She ran along the sidewalk, clutching a small bouquet, her eyes sparkling with joy. Behind her walked Claire Matthews, a serene smile lighting her face. Gone was the weariness of the past. In its place shone the calm of a woman who had weathered storms and found light. A wicker basket filled with fresh flowers swung from her arm, symbols of a life blooming anew. Michael Hayes strolled beside them, calm yet radiant with pride. Every so often he lifted the little girl high, her laughter soaring into the open sky. He was no longer only a powerful businessman, but a father, a partner, a companion. They stopped before a freshly opened flower shop. A wooden sign swung gently above the door, "Light and Bloom." Claire crouched down, helping her daughter place the bouquet in a vase by the entrance. Her eyes glowed like autumn sunshine. Passers-by recognized them, but instead of whispers and scorn, there were only kind smiles and gentle nods. Claire reached for Michael's hand. This time there was no hesitation, no trembling, only the firm clasp of family. "We really did begin again," she whispered. Michael smiled, bending to kiss her forehead. Their daughter skipped circles around them, her laughter mingling with the autumn breeze. And on that street once haunted by shadows now bloomed only color, light, and love. A quiet testament to one truth. Storms may break us, but they can never steal our will to live and to love.